for years and somebody who was in special forces. And, we've been trained on doing IVs and trachs and things like that. And I just looked at him and I was like, there was nothing I could do. And within a couple seconds, the corpsmen were on him. They trached him. They gave him CPR, flew in a medevac helicopter, and they medevaced him. And the 4 other guys had shrapnel wounds, and he was out. And to answer your question, I had never experienced anything like that previously in my training and anything. So I was almost like in a state of shock for that 15 or 20 seconds until the corpsman pushed me out of the way. It was a feeling that I had never experienced before. And it really wasn't the blood in the guts or the arms missing or anything like that. It was just this feeling of hopelessness, not being able to help him. And that was it. And then, as you know, that was compounded even worse by what had happened later on that day. And that was a feeling that
when you found out the picture fell down and you found out he was cheating on him with Ashley, right?
Yeah. I mean, might as well talk about it. I mean, it's part of the book, but so after someone dies, you have to separate their personal effects from their military gear. And then the personal effects get sent home and the military gear gets, put in supply. I was good friends with Mike. I volunteered to do it. In the course of doing this, I was, removing pieces of bone and flesh and stuff like that from his gear. It's on my hands. My hands are, it's on my pants and everything. And I got almost done, and I was down at the bottom of his rucksack, and I pulled out his wallet, and I'm like, open the wallet. I'm like, $32 in cash, Pennsylvania ID card, driver's license, social security card. And then in one of the pockets was a picture, and it was a picture of my girlfriend. And on the back of it, it said, "Love, Ashley." And if you can imagine in your mind that you just watched your friend blow up, and now here you are 3 hours later, and you just found out that he was hooking up with your girlfriend, you want to kill this person who is dead. And it's such a dichotomy in your brain. I mean, it was such a conundrum. You have all of this rage and hate, and you can't do anything. Yep. And you feel helpless. And now I will tell you that this experience pales in comparison to the way I felt the day I walked out of the courtroom when the judge gave full legal custody to my ex-wife.
I can agree to that, man. That resonates with me 100% from the worst traumas of my life. That court case was almost the exact same feeling.
And so imagine the death of a friend, the betrayal of a woman, everything within a 4-hour period. And I remember I walked out into the desert by myself that night, and I had a canteen full of Jack Daniels, and I had some Marlboro Red cigarettes, and I sat there and drank and smoked cigarettes, trying to figure things out. And Duran, you know from the book, there were 2 very powerful entries in that book. One was when I realized everything came together when the war ended, shortly after the war ended for me. And I sat down and probably wrote the most prophetic, profound, powerful thoughts that I've ever written in my life as a 20-year-old Marine. And I talked about faith. I talked about education. I talked about love, betrayal, in a way that I could never capture again. And that, after reading that passage and that journal entry, and then writing the conclusion, the reflection section, and the critical life lessons sections of the book were the most difficult for me, because that's the message I wanted to convey. If somebody could read about what I had to deal with in a 4-hour period and how I managed that, anybody can find strength going through what they're going through in their lives.
Yeah, that's very commendable that you wrote you know, as much as you did, because, you know, a lot of people wouldn't let people in to how they was feeling. You know, a lot of men, we don't, you know, we don't go, we don't, you know, we don't write all of our emotions out. We just hold them all in. But with the way that you wrote inside the book, I was just very, you know, I was very intrigued, and I was very impressed that you just put it all out there. And I really appreciate that, because a lot of men, they don't do that. So let me ask you this question, and then you can ask us some questions too, because I know we've been asking you a lot of questions. But this is my last question, I promise.
No, go ahead. I love it.
But so do you still have PTSD after experiencing what you experienced with Mike, and, you know, how to process the emotions with, you know, your girlfriend cheating on with your, you know, best friend? Are you still like processing that to today, or have you gone through some coping mechanism to kind of like relieve yourself of all of that trauma?
So let me answer this in a couple different ways. So with regard to, do I have PTSD with what happened with Mike? No. I don't have these flashbacks, or, you know, I don't wake up in the middle of the night sweating and, you know, have vivid mental images of him laying there with his arms blown off or anything like that. Do I have PTSD with regard to the betrayal of my ex-girlfriend? No, but I will tell you, it impacted my ability to have a healthy relationship with women throughout my life. So first, coming from a family where my mother was married 4 times, my father was married 3 times. I didn't grow up with a mom. My father had custody. So not having the typical emotional support of a female figure in my life, then growing up in that environment, and then having the betrayal of a woman, you know, who you were in love with, that impacted my ability to have maintain healthy relationships with women. And as I wrote in the book, I just used women for my satisfaction up until my late 30s. It was all about intimacy and sex, and I never could really connect emotionally. And so is that PTSD? This goes back to our bigger discussion. What do we label PTSD? Was it from my childhood experience not having a mother? Was it from a trigger event of the betrayal? What was it? So this is where we have to be very clear in our articulation of PTSD, our definition of it, and how, you know, how we define it, but also how we manage it. It took me, even in my marriage, I didn't have this emotional connection. I dated a woman after my divorce and truly fell in love and truly had an emotional connection that I had not experienced in my marriage. Is this PTSD? I don't know. But this goes back to what we talked about. I was old enough in my life to understand it, recognize it. And now that's why am I so optimistic about life? Because I know I'm going to find a woman and I'm going to fall in love and I'm going to have a wonderful life. And it's a matter of time. Now I just have to be patient. However, all of those things that happened in my life, do they haunt me? I don't know. Will they impact me? I don't know. But the only thing I can say is I'm self-aware enough to know they exist, which is half the battle. And that's half the battle.
And it all goes back to the coping mechanisms too, of being able to deal with your different traumas and how you process things to that nature. Yeah. So what is some of the biggest coping mechanisms that you would say that you're dealing with? You know, I mean, I know you don't have PTSD of certain things that happen. I mean, I kind of find it interesting that you really don't have it, you know, with all the stuff that you've seen transpire in the war. But like, how are you dealing with it? Or do you just like do like mindful meditations? What are some of your ways that you're, not actively looking, thinking back to all of that stuff, like just trying to relieve yourself of all of that in a way?
Yeah. So like I said, it's a spectrum. And like Chris, on a 1 to 10 scale, where do you rate yourself? An 8, a 6, a 4? Like for me, I rate myself like a 3, 4-ish. based upon what we're talking about. For other things, a 6, 7-ish. So when I go back to coping mechanisms, and I'm not that guy who, starts doing breathing techniques or meditates or does yoga, or, I am that guy who just keeps marching forward and keeps moving forward in a way that's positive, and try. And this is my mantra in a way. I have like a bunch of different mantras. But the one that I've adopted the most recently is, if you live in the past, you're depressed. If you live in the future, you're anxious. If you live in the present, you can control your emotions a lot better. So I don't sit there and think about these things or dwell upon these things. And I try not to concern myself with what may happen in the future. And if I do recognize myself thinking about what's happening in the future that you can't control anyway, what I try to do is shape it in a positive way. So at the end of the day, what I'm doing is living in the present, and I'm just trying to, shape my future in the most positive way possible, and prepare for being reunited with my children, prepare for, the woman that I'm going to share my life with, and preparing for those things in a positive way. That's kind of the best answer I can give you.
So, Chris, we kind of go bounce it back to you. What if men are struggling today with PTSD? What is some of like the coping mechanisms that you would recommend that they can do? Obviously, you can't recommend a lot because everything might not work for everybody. But what are some of the coping mechanisms that you think that maybe have worked for you?
So for me, I think the biggest things that helped me was journaling. And there's a really good kind of mental experiment where you talk to your future self, and then you go back and talk to your past self. That past self journey, where mentally you get into a meditative state, you go back to a really traumatic event from your childhood, like the most definitive point of your childhood that really affected you. I went back to that point as an adult to find my child self. And I talked to that child to find out what he needed and how he needed it. And I took him from that place, and now he walks with me every day. And
it's a really good way of thinking about it.
It is an actual meditative thing. And then for me, caring for that child every day helps me be a better man, be a better father. Because like I have split custody. So in the weeks when my kids aren't here, there's still a child in this home who needs love and affection and compassion. And although he's inside of me, that's still a child, and he still needs those things as a 38-year-old man. And that's something a lot of men, you go through these different points in your life. You're a child, you're a teenager, you're a man, you're a senior. And that's not the case. We are all children growing in different bodies. And so if you are really struggling in a really dark place, man, you can plug into your inner self, and that point of yourself that really needs. That was a really tough meditation, and it took me, I think, 2 or 3 times before it really worked for me. I had a really good guide in that meditation to get me into a really good space. But I think journaling and that one experiment really opened my eyes to what I needed as a man and as a child, I guess. But I think, Jim, you brought up a really good point about the scale of PTSD. And when I was doing my groups, there was what we call the triphasic model. Have you ever heard about that?
No.
So as you're dealing with your traumas, there's different phases as you deal with them. So like when I first started to get into recovery, talking about events from my childhood was traumatic. Like I could not talk about them without getting into a heightened state, and now I can speak about those things like they have zero effect on my emotional state anymore, right? So in that first phase of recovery, you're really heightened and everything is really raw and everything is super emotional, and you can't really you can't really comprehend what's going on. In the second phase of it, you can go back to those points and look at them from a more enlightened state. And then in the third phase, you can literally go back and talk about those events with zero effect on your personality, right? And there's actually now for PTSD specifically, because this is more like childhood traumas, but for PTSD, there's a fourth phase where you can go back to the events, talk about them with other people like we're doing today. And you can, there's zero effect on your body. And I really think that's, Jim, where you're at for a lot of your stuff from the war. You talk about it in such a way that it's, it almost doesn't affect you. And that's really,
that's why I was
it's
so
really
curious,
surprising to see, man. When I talk about people with combat experience, man, when they talk about those actual combat events, they're like, you can see the instant reaction in their body, their breathing changes, you can see the blood flowing, you can see their hyper state, they are aroused in that
it's
moment.
almost as if they're actually still there in their mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's literally like the triphasic model in real time, right in front of you. And Jim, I think you're on certain things, you're in phase 4, and certain things you're in phase 2 or 3, right? Like, and that's recovery from trauma. Well, you'll think that you're fine, and other things you're not fine.
Yeah. Let me say this. For me, there's the physical, the psychological, and the emotional components. And too often, especially within the Veterans Administration, they want to enroll you into their program and medicate you. And that is really detrimental, in my opinion, because it doesn't cover the 3 aspects that you really need to do. How can I manage this? Because I go to the gym every day and I work out, harder than most 20-year-olds. I'm in better shape than most guys in their 20s and 30s. I played rugby, and I still play rugby at 54 years old. And I'm, better than most of the young kids out there because of my determination, because of my fitness, because of my skill. So now you have this physical component, and most people don't incorporate that into the whole treatment process. This is the biggest, thing for me. It clears my mind. It makes me feel good when I'm done. Now you have the emotional piece. How do you deal with that? Do you have friends? Do you have a therapy dog? Do you have people to talk to? Do you have a woman in your life, or a man in your life, or a companion in your life? So there's number 2. And then everybody gets put into this bin. Let's go look at the psychological. And that's where, we talk about these other things. But for me, it's all 3 combined. If I didn't have my workout schedule and my exercise, that would be, that would probably be the biggest thing to hurt me. And, the emotional, obviously, my mother passed away, my father passed away. My brother is going through addiction with heroin and methamphetamines and alcohol. And I can't rely upon him, I gotta call him up. But I have some good friends. And so you look at all 3 of those. And that's really, if you want to talk about coping mechanisms, you have to talk about everything. You can't just talk about the psychological. You got to talk about the emotional. You got to talk about the physical. Oh, and so let me tell you, I want to tell you a quick story. So, and this answers your question with regard to how I deal with events and things. So I was in my 2nd tour in Afghanistan. No, actually, it was my 3rd tour in Afghanistan, excuse me. And we were on a rifle range, and a blue on green incident happened where the Afghans started shooting at the Americans and the US soldiers. And I was leading a training mission with the Special Forces team and the Afghan Special Forces. So we come running onto the scene, and the firing had just ended. And I go running up to this Army 2nd lieutenant. And at the time I believe I was a lieutenant commander. And I go running up to him, and I'm like, "What's going on? Who's in charge here?" And he looks down, and he sees my rank, and he goes, "You are, sir." And I'm like, "What the hell?" So I literally was like, I guess I'm in charge, and so I separated the Afghans from the soldiers. We moved the injured guys over. There was 3 dead contractors. We separated everybody. We took the their rifles from them, and I speak Dari, so I was talking to the Afghan soldiers and directing everything, and it's pretty neat. But anyway, we got done and everything was secured, and we had to load the dead guys onto the ambulance and get them out. And this one contractor is a big dude. He was a big boy. He must have weighed like 260. And so I told the NCO, I get in the ambulance, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to be outside. When I say 3, we're going to lift this guy up. I'm going to press him up, and we're going to put him on the rack. And they're like, I'm like, he's like, are you sure you can do it? I'm like, yeah, I got it. This is when I was in my 20s, and I was a beast back then. I mean, I was actually my mid 30s, early 30s. I was just a beast. All I did was go to the gym and hook up. So anyway, I go, all right, ready? On 3. I go 1, 2, 3. I'm like, I press this guy up, and I'm holding him and I'm getting ready to move it over. And the guy inside the ambulance, his end catches the lip of the thing, and this dude just the stretcher goes like this, and this dude just goes, and if you ever hear the expression dead weight, it's true. Like a dead guy hit this metal floor of the ambulance, and the blood that was all on him just splattered all over my face in my uniform. So imagine this picture in your head. I'm standing there like at a scene out of Braveheart, like I'm Mel Gibson, and I have blood all over my face and neck and my camouflage top. And this like private goes, "Be careful, sir." Like, because he saw the dead guy fall. He's like, "Be careful, sir." And I turned around and I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" My face with the blood on it. And this guy, he just ran away. And like one of the special forces dudes was just laughing at me. And I was like, "What?" And he goes, "Go look in the mirror." And like, I remember looking in the mirror, and I had just like blood all over me. So do I reminisce about those things? Do I have flashback? No. How do I deal with it? I deal with it. That was pretty fucking funny. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but that's the way I deal with it. It happened. It was fucked up. I look at it as something that, I can look back and laugh at, and I move on. I don't want to get caught up and dwell on stuff. I want to move forward in my life. I don't want to look in the rearview mirror all the time. I want to look through the windshield and see what's ahead of me. And if I'm continually going back and reflecting on these things and questioning these things, they happened. Deal with it, move on, and try to in the best way you can. And sorry I digressed, went down that rabbit hole, but that's
It's all
how
good.
that's the
It's all
best way I
good.
can explain it.
It's all good. So what is all right, so it's been a pleasure talking to everybody. What are some of your final thoughts that you want to say around, surrounding PTSD, that most people probably don't even know about? What are some of your final thoughts, Jim?
I would say this. I truly believe that people experience different levels of mental health issues. And I don't know if we can categorize them as PTSD. I mean, I've seen people who have clinical psychological issues. I dated a woman who was bipolar. I've seen it myself and experienced it. But I'm always hesitant to just jump in, and everybody suffers from everything. And especially in today's society, I broke my nail in gym class. I have PTSD. I've seen my sister, who is the biggest hypochondriac in the world, says, "Oh, my boyfriend broke up with me. I have PTSD." I think that we're going down a very dangerous, slippery slope when everything is a mental health issue and everything is PTSD. Like, I even was very candid when I said that I know that my PTSD is memory loss and other things that I know that are part of this. Do I fall into the broader spectrum of mental health issues? Yes, but I've dealt with it. So my what I want everyone to take away from this is you still have to be tough and deal with things and have fortitude, but at the same time recognize the things that are impacting you or dealing with you. And is it all mental health issues? No, it could be, you know, I had a bad business decision and now it's going to impact my business for 6 months, or I made a bad career choice and I'm in a job that I don't like. I dated the wrong woman and we broke up. Is this the reason to say I have a mental health issue and I have PTSD? No. But to the people who do, I would say address these things in the best way you can for yourself. Recognize them and address them, because you and you alone are your best advocate, your best therapist. Because at the end of the day, I've seen so many bullshit therapists. You go in there, and I've experienced it personally. You go in there for 45 minutes, you talk, hey, great time, chat it up, see you next week. Oh, by the way, that was $350. Do they care about you the way you care about you? Nobody does. And the other cool thing is, if you have really good friends that do care, they're the best therapists in the world, because you can share with them anything. And the other last thing I will say is, it took more courage, more strength, and more fortitude to write the book and to talk about the things that I've done than to package it up and put it on a shelf and not talk about it. And do I get emotional when I talk about these things? I try not to. But the things that I've experienced and the way I feel and being able to talk about it was the most difficult thing that I've ever done in my life.
I resonate there, definitely. And Jim, I appreciate you being on today and being authentic and vulnerable with us, man. I really appreciate your feedback and your stories. I'd love to chat more with you and have you on again, man. You're a great dude, and I think a really strong advocate for mental health. So
Yeah, likewise. So if you haven't picked up Jim's book, The War Journal, it's an amazing read. Go out there and purchase it. Help, authors. This is a really incredible book. You can learn a lot about yourself and all the traumas that you have to deal with. It's really good. So on that, I just wanted to let everybody know, have a great day. Hopefully we will try to go ahead and get you onto like another show. If you want to come back on, Jim, just let me know. Just DM me on TikTok and we can set that up.
Hey, Duran, Chris, I'd love to talk about a topic that is really important to me, parental alienation. And it's something that really isn't being spoken about, and it really needs to be addressed. And
I think this is the #1 pandemic affecting the world right now.
And if you would be so kind to have me on in the future, I would love to talk about it, because I've spent hundreds of hours doing research on that, and it needs to be in the forefront of everybody's mind. And I'd love to talk about that. And the other thing, I'll leave on a happy note. The book has a lot of pictures. I made it for Marines, so it's got a lot of pictures. So yeah, all my Marine friends were like, "Did you put a lot of pictures in there?" I'm like, "I got your back, brother. You got a lot of pictures in there for you."
Any crayons for the Army guys or what?
Exactly. But what happens is the Army guys wind up eating the crayons, so you're screwed either way.
Sorry, guys, I had to.
But Chris, Duran, thank you very much. It was a pleasure, and I hope that I can be on in the future.
Yeah, we'll coordinate a time that works for both of us. So it's a nice pleasure talking to you.
All right. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Awesome, guys. Have a good one.
Peace, brother.